everyone, and welcome to the Dyslexia Life Hacks Show. I'm your host, Matthew Head, and in this episode, I'm talking to Aakash Odedra. He's a dancer and co-founder of Aakash Odedra Company. He has put together a show called Little Murmur, which is currently touring as we record this in September 2024. This show is directly inspired by his experiences with dyslexia growing up. He's performed in over 40 countries and done many shows, including Queen Elizabeth II's Diamond Jubilee celebration. As always, I'll put extended show notes as well as links to things we talk about over at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. Welcome to the show, Aakash.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
No problem at all. Where I wanted to start today off with is that you've danced in many countries. And are there any particular countries that when you had the opportunity to dance in that place, you were like, yes, that's where I really want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I have my personal favorites. I think Italy's one of them, definitely. Switzerland's another. The UAE, Abu Dhabi. I think these are some of my top places to go. And of course, India, because you have so many friends and, family that are there. So, yeah, I would say still, if it's in order, I would say Italy and Switzerland as number one, then UAE, Abu Dhabi, and probably India.
So what particular about Italy draws you to it? What sort of really kind
I
of...
think Italian passion definitely comes through. And I think as an artist, you're like a sponge of energy, right?
Yeah.
You kind of feed off what's being thrown at you through the audience and try and give back to them. If they're throwing pasta at me, then I'll throw a few spices back at them. But I feel like I need to get enough from them, and they definitely give their fair share. They give a big meal as an audience. They bring a lot of energy and just the place, the culturally, I think, and they're such theater enthusiasts. I think it's really heartwarming. And, I mean, I remember my first show in Italy where it was packed and the aisles were full. They didn't have enough room. And then they put mats on the floor between the stage and the front seats so people could sit. And in fact, they asked last minute, can you do another show tomorrow? Which is, I've never had that before.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of passion to be a part of the arts, even if it's as an audience member. And I think that's incredible. And just the beauty of the country, it's just incredible. What a beautiful place with so much history. And I feel like it's this kind of confluence between the past and the present. It exists in kind of one big mix, and I really like that. I think that's beautiful.
Oh wow, that sounds really cool. I'm imagining this theatre where they've got everybody rammed in between the seats on mats all the way up to the stage. You almost touching the front row at that point. No, that's really cool. And what a place to go do it with that atmosphere. And it must have, as you alluded to, raised your performance to meet it. Were you exhausted by the time you'd finished as you're pouring all this passion and energy in?
I think I get more hyped. So my energy after the show finishes is even higher. So it just keeps going higher and higher and higher.
Oh, wow.
And it has to accumulate after that in some sort of great clubbing or workout session after the show's finished. Just to burn up the energy. And from that point, you can just keep going. It just skyrockets. And I'm a big fan of architecture. I love architecture. Italian architecture, when you go into the theaters and you see this very old kind of rustic, grand theater with these red old curtains and chandeliers, and it just has an atmosphere of the past again that's kind of gives you a flavor of what it might have been back in its heydays. And it kind of, I feel like each artist that performs in a theater leaves their imprint in there. I really feel the presence of greatness when I perform in Italy, that there is something about the artists that are there that have left a great mark in that space, any space that I perform in.
Oh, that's really cool. And this leads me on to your love of the arts and dance. I mean, I could just tell by the way you light up when we're talking about something to do with the show that you love it greatly. Where do you think the seed of that started?
I've tried to answer this myself because no one else in my family dances. Genetically, I come from a royal warrior caste community, and the men do dance, but it's a type of dance before war. So it's kind of to hype them up. When they do this folk dance, it's quite springy and quite energetic, and so I feel like I have those traits. And one of my best friends, who's from the same community as me, kind of has those similar characteristics. And I suppose that's the genetic part of it. But environmental part, like the environment I grew up in, was definitely in complete contrast to the world I inhabit. So, I was born and brought up in Birmingham, and in a place called Sparkbrook. It's really uninspiring in every way possible. I mean, if we say, we look at the weather today and we say it's grey and miserable, I feel like Birmingham's like that 365 days for me, right? Anyway, because it felt probably more gloomy than it was. So something inside me, and I suppose then the only thing I can put it down to is my spirituality, because I have been very, very, when I was young, no one else was religious in my family, but I was very religious. And I remember sitting in the temple room praying with my father, like him teaching me, and being fascinated by these gods and goddesses and this mythology. And this mythology somehow connected to my cells, to my roots. And it also felt, from a dyslexic perspective, larger than life. It felt like it was a world of imagination that you could immerse yourself into and I could escape into. So I feel like that option of escaping was something that has contributed towards me doing what I do. And somehow, when music used to come on, I feel like I was a responder. I would just respond to music through movement, and I would get lost in a world of imagination. The people around me who'd be laughing at me or clapping, and whatever it may be, they cease to exist. And what was beautiful is that you genuinely created a world, and it might have been, this world of imagination, but what an incredible world to be able to exist in when your environment outside was so dull and so mundane.
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing about you getting completely absorbed and lost in it. Now, obviously, we got the other part of your childhood, being a dyslexic. At what point of time did you find that out with? And did you feel like dance was probably a bit of an outlet something you could get away from everything with?
Well, I never associated dyslexia with anything. I remember one of my teachers who, I mean, I went to 9 different schools, and this teacher in year 4 was my favorite teacher. And he came to watch a show recently because it turned out someone in my office somehow was connected to this guy. And I was over the moon. And he said to me, he said, because I was in India at one point at the age of 7 for about 9 or 10 months. When I came back, I couldn't read or write at all. The only 3 words I could probably spell was cat, may, and one other word. There was like literally 3 words I could spell. So in the assessment, the people around my teacher said, "Oh, I think he's special needs." And I mean, it made no difference to me. But I remember Mr. Brazier telling me and him saying to me recently when he met me, he said, "I knew you wasn't special needs. I knew you were different. But what was your different?" And what he and another support teacher did is they put my paperwork and files together. But by the time they got everything together, I'd left that school, and they always remembered that I left that school, and they felt really bad that they weren't able to help me. So the dyslexic part, even though I was told I was dyslexic, I thought it was to do with reading and writing. But when I was in school, when I was in secondary, much further on, I didn't associate with a lot of the people who were not interested in education or learning. I was interested in learning, and I couldn't formulate things in the format that I was expected to present them. And so dyslexia then for me became something that I fought against. So they said, "Oh, you get more time in exams." I said, "I don't want more times." "Oh, you get to do 8, 9 subjects." I said, "No, I'm going to do 15." So I did 15 GCSEs. I was in 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning, and I would finish at 10 at night. Because I was so determined. Whether I got good grades or not wasn't the point. The point was this kind of sheer determination not to be labeled stupid. which which was such a negative connotation, kind of a stigma attached to dyslexia. So that was that part of my life, and it was difficult because still you have to bring yourself back to the board and the teacher writing something on the board and trying to follow ordinary systems. So it took me a very long time, and I remember now looking back on it on retrospect, I think what's interesting is as a dyslexic, your intelligence develops very differently. I think creativity becomes something that gets infused into every aspect of your life. So, when you can't when you can't spell a word, you would find a sentence to compensate for the word. So you start to create pathways. So I started to create pathways to mask this kind of ability not to do things in this system. And it was only much, much, much later on in my life when I think I was talking to someone about making a new piece, possibly on dyslexia, and I told them about the story of me not spelling my own name correctly for 21 years. Um, that's when I started to kind of embrace the idea of dyslexia and what it actually means. And then I did research, and then I saw that, I think Richard Branson, I can't remember, and Einstein, a lot of these entrepreneurs have dyslexia. And I realized the research, it's not that you're less than anyone else or kind of stigmatized and put into this category of being dumb. It's more so that your brain is, in fact, faster. It's so fast that it's difficult I think it's 200 to 4,000 times faster. And so for your processing speed in your mind and your hand and your kind of rationale to be able to catch up with that is almost impossible. So I think dyslexic people are creative because they're from the beginning to function in the systems that they're in. They find pathways to navigate and to create their own paths that they can kind of work around these systems. So yeah, when I created this piece, I felt like, yes, there is something. And I started to really own the fact that I'm dyslexic. And then I started to own the fact that actually dyslexic doesn't mean different, bad. Different means beautiful. Different means unique. Different means you're going to do different things and you're going to do incredible things. So I started to turn this curse, what felt like a curse, around and make it into a blessing. And I suppose that's why I'm here today, being able to speak about this topic.
Yeah, yeah. So, what sort of point in life did you find out that A, dyslexia was a thing, and B, that might be why you were different to some of the people at school, why you had struggled through school? Was there a particular age or a particular catalyst that let this happen in your life?
So you can, like, people often ask me, what does it feel like to dance? I wouldn't know because I've only been dancing from the time I've walked.
Yes, yes, yes.
When you've been a dyslexic your whole life, you don't know exactly when and what, but you've been different. And if you've not known life other than what you've been working with, it's hard to kind of be objective and say, this was the point. But I do know points where things change for me in terms of actually acknowledging it. And it was really through production, through Murmur, where when I started to do research and I started to actually and meet many other people who have dyslexia, and especially through the show, and people would come, tears streaming down their cheeks and say, I've never spoke about it, but this is the first time I can actually say I understand exactly what you're talking about. And I think what's also beautiful in Murmur is that you don't have to be a dyslexic to understand it. Ultimately, we have all struggled in life.
Yeah, yeah.
Our struggles often start off in school, in secondary, in college, in university, in work, in life. So the story is ultimately also about struggle and struggling and triumph through that struggle. And I suppose it was then where I started to say, yes, I am dyslexic. It was, so the story goes of Little Murmur or Murmur. The story goes, and it's a true story where I always spelt my name Akash, Akash. And even though I've flicked through my passport a million times, I didn't notice there was another A in my name. Actual name is spelled Aakash. And it was only at the age of 21, even though I'd literally flicked through it a million times. No one corrected me, not my mother or father. No one ever bothered saying, you're spelling your name wrong. When I did notice that mistake, I felt like I found a sense of control. And it was all about this journey, about finding a sense of control and owning and being able to see things. And then the more I kind of accepted this idea of dyslexia, the more I started to understand it. And I mean, I started to focus on the beauty rather than negativity, which is, your brain processes things so quickly that you sometimes see the bigger picture quicker than actually working out how you got there. Like sometimes you can get the answer, but it's difficult to find the formula or to explain the formula of how you reach there. And yeah, so I think it's just, I feel like our dyslexic brains are larger than life. And I feel like we're being shut into a can, into this system, which doesn't actually allow your gift to flourish. And it is a gift if you can allow it to be a gift. Of course, I have my days where I send the weirdest emails. I get the timings wrong, names, difficult. Like I forget names. I mean, 1,010,000 things do happen
Yeah.
because we're functioning in this world. And, I know I'm trying to save money and I'm booking a train for 5 p.m. and it ends up being 5 a.m.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
You know,
Yep.
you know what I mean?
I do.
All of these
I feel
things
that one.
have and you check what you're trying to send or do 1,000,000 times and you still get it wrong. That is all there. But I think that is also what can make it interesting and fun
Yes.
if you allow it to be frustrating but fun.
Yes. So, have you ever done any official diagnosis? Talked to any dyslexia specialists? Was there any point in your life that, because it'd be a point like as you mentioned, you'd be like being a dancer, you've been it all your life, but there may be a point in time that somebody turns you onto the idea there's neurodiversity and dyslexia. Maybe that's kind of what you have. Then you work your way through some of the diagnosis and start picking up tools. What sort of things were you using at that point?
I think wisdom is knowledge applied, knowledge is power, and experience is your true teacher.
Yeah.
And it's through my experience that I've kind of taught myself because I always felt like no two dyslexics are the same.
No, I agree.
Like a thumbprint. My thumbprint will be very different to yours.
Yep.
And often we can say they're both thumbs, but they're actually quite different in their identity. And I've never really, I think, tried to. I have been diagnosed with dyslexia. I mean, officially, very recently,
Okay.
like through a full, and it was very tedious.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure the person on the other side actually. I mean, it's probably following a yes and no category in kind of diagnosing. And yeah, it wasn't really helpful. And then someone telling me you use this pen and it's going to help you do this. And I
Hmm.
don't like technology at all.
Oh,
I
okay.
I like buttons. I don't these phones that one of these phones which I have to use was a nightmare for me in the beginning. Because I could literally talk to you and on my Nokia at the same time type without looking, type a completely different conversation because I've realized that I'm sensitive physically. There's lots of things that I can do. So I've learned to work in my own system and in my
Yeah.
own way and navigate around things. And I mean, it will be different for everyone. I went to Singapore. We were performing, I don't know if we were performing Murmur or something else, maybe something else. And we went to see these kids who are dyslexic and they have a school specially for them. Method is incredible. And I mean, hats off to them. The sums that these children were doing were way beyond me. I couldn't even, and they were
Mm.
I mean, they were on some other, they were on some celestial level. And clearly, there are systems that work if they're implemented in the right way, probably from the right time. But I suppose, in England, especially, let's speak about
Mm.
close to home, which is home.
Mm.
We have such a yes, no, and if you don't fit into this, it kind of you're put into a certain category. And also it's not their fault often because funding is cut right back, and I feel like awareness of being neuro diverse or having ADHD or dyslexia, whatever it may be, I feel that kind of awareness is more prominent now than it ever has been, in the past.
Yeah.
And I feel, but I feel now it's going on a different tangent. And like a lot of people tell me, they said, look, I think a lot of my friends and younger generation who were hanging around with me were kind of laughing, saying, if you don't have dyslexia or ADHD or some type of something, you're not cool. So kind of into a completely different tangent. So now everyone wants to have something or be on some spectrum, or it's kind of so. I mean, but for people who so there's two things I'm also trying to say here is one is not trying to go against the grain as a young boy and not trying to be put into a box actually became my blessing. And where I feel if I was put into a box and I was told I was dyslexic and this is a system I was given and this is the way it's going to help you and being frustrated in that, I don't know if I would have been able to break that box. I would have already conditioned myself on some level. The brain is a powerful tool. It's a powerful tool if you can use your imagination. If you can dream for the sky, you might hit a lamppost, but at least you got that far.
Yes, yeah. Bang, that lamppost is in the way. Yeah, it's one step to the right. Yeah. So I want to bring dancing into this. Obviously, you've touched on Murmur and how how it starts linking, but more your kind of life as a dancer. You mentioned it was something just in you from childhood, but you somehow turned that into your job and your kind of passion in life and your career, which is awesome. So, how did you manage to sort of get the multiple things you were studying at school as well as fitting dancing around them long days? And then how did you roll out into turning it into something you could make a living out of and allow you to kind of express yourself in that way while keeping the lights on?
Because dance was life and life was dance. If I was sitting in the room, I can still dance while staying still.
Right.
I can still see the letters moving on the board. I can still see things in my mind's eye that other people couldn't see. So life was dance for me and dance was life. So in a way, there was no separation between the two. And the only difference was I could completely go away into a different world if I wanted to in dance or merge the two. But it was always kind of a part of this. And I suppose the other most important ingredient into how did I make, dance my career is sheer stupidity
Okay.
and audacity
Right.
and naivety.
Yeah.
If you overthink, if you're, I feel if you over intellectualize what you're going to be, what you're going to gain from it, and how you're going to survive, actually you're not daring to dream. You're not, and I think that naivety of living in the world within my mind and a place where it has no boundaries kind of made me have the audacity to actually go and just do what I was doing anyway every day because I didn't care about money. I didn't care about clothes. I didn't care about most things most people did. I just did what I did because I did it and I felt like it gave me a space within to breathe. In fact, this entity, this being, this kind of relationship of dance is so vast that I can't even put I can't even create a poetic sentence to justify the world that it creates and what it moves within me. But it was I think a combination of course all these things of stupidity, naivety, audacity, all of these things I suppose that made me dance because now if I speak to the younger generation and some of them are really good dancers. And they're, are you going to go into dance? No. Why? I've got to pay my bills. I've got to do this. I want this car. I want this phone. I want this laptop. I want to go on this many holidays.
Um,
Whereas
yeah.
it wasn't the case for me. I I felt like in life, I was a traveler and I am a traveler. And as a traveler who literally traveled around with just a backpack or a plastic bag in my hand, both metaphorically and reality, and moved so much, I felt like I went wherever the wind kind of guided me. And I think that was the beauty of it, that there was a trust in an energy which I believe is much higher than myself. And each human being is born with a purpose. And I feel
Mm.
like I didn't realize my purpose, but my purpose made me realize it. So I feel like this kind of what I call the unseen energy. helped me make my life what it is today. And
Yeah.
it's grateful to whoever that is.
Yeah. Wow. It's like just this internal thing that just keeps you moving. Yeah. So for anybody who say wants to buy tickets to Little Murmur, what style of dancing is it?
It's so it's like there's a lot of it's physical theater and dance. So a lot of acting in it.
Okay.
And now I'm not dancing it. The other dancers are dancing. So I danced a piece called Murmur, which was a version. This is called Little Murmur. So it was kind of
Right.
a smaller version of that, but with different dances in it. And what's interesting is neither of those dancers are dyslexic. So, but we all have one thing in common is we all have an A in our name,
Oh, okay.
all about finding that missing A. And and it's really interesting because each dancer has their own version of the story. So it changes from Kali to Subhash to whoever else may dance it, Kesha or Anaya. So it has its own kind of story to it. And you know, the dancers speak different languages as well, and we've incorporated that at points
Yeah.
you know, to create this sense of chaos. And so I think it's an incredible piece. It will be touring. I'm not sure when because I'm not dancing it, so I've not paid much attention to when it's touring or where it's touring. But it is an incredible piece, and they made it their own. And I think that's beautiful, that it
Yeah.
lives beyond me. The story of a struggle with the idea of triumph at the end. And it's very poetic. And I think the most beautiful thing is when an adult comes to watch and they feel like a child. When they feel like they're lost in that world of fantasy. It's almost like when you watch a Disney movie for the first time and you get that you get that feeling that you're in that world, and I think Little Murmur creates that. It makes adults into children, and it makes children into even bigger children. I don't know.
So, how do you took in somebody who's an engineer here, so very practical and tactical for most of my sort of thinking. Um, so, how do you capture in and express during musical sort of theatre the struggles of dyslexia, and how do you convey that across the audience and choreograph that and get other people to do it? How's it's kind of come out of you? What goes on that way?
I think we've all experienced frustration. We've all experienced laughter. These are just common human emotions. And in dyslexia, you discover that you go through the whole spectrum. I mean, if you can't laugh about certain things, reading words in a way that, I mean, completely loses the meaning of it. If you can't make a joke out of it, then you're kind of losing the point.
Yeah,
Keep that human element of it in there, I
yeah,
think,
yeah.
and work with what the dancers have experienced in their own lives, which is, all the frustrations in different ways and strange and funny situations, and kind of use that as a bridge to connect where you are as a human, as a dyslexic, or me, sorry, me as a human and as a dyslexic, to the other dancing
Yeah.
body and artist on the other side, who's also a human, who's also experienced a lot of things, but in a different way. So I suppose that kind of human connectivity is how we connect to each other in the piece, and then we use that to kind of fan out a bigger net that becomes like a connective network between the audience and the artist, where the audience members feel like they are in the shoes of the dancer, of the artist, and that they go on this entire journey, and at the end they find and feel like they found themselves. And in this and it's incredible because it's visually very enriching. It's got this circle of fans, and there's papers that blow around, and it almost feels like you're in this vortex of chaos.
Okay.
And there's this projection of little birds that are kind of flying across the papers. So you're almost seeing this kind of 3D world. So you're glimpsing into the mind of a dyslexic and into this kind of three-dimensional world. And I mean, I don't want to give everything away, but it does really draw on this world of being immersed in this kind of tornado of chaos, but within the chaos, you kind of find a sense of stilt and surety.
Yeah. Wow. It sounds. So you don't want to give too much away, but it sounds visually very, very interesting. I like the idea of the fans blowing the paper around, the stuff going across it to kind of visually spin it around. That's kind of a cool, fun, powerful kind of image. Now you touched on earlier that you did a fair bit of research around dyslexia when you were developing this show. What sort of particular things surprised you out of that? You obviously touched on the entrepreneurs, but was there other things that really kind of grabbed you? Like, wow, I didn't know the dyslexic brain was capable of doing this and things like that.
Yeah, I think especially this thing where it made sense about memory, long-term and short-term memory.
Okay.
And there's different theories why people develop dyslexia. There's various theories about how it functions, and it's interesting also to read people's life stories and to see how they masked what they had, or how they used what they had, or in some cases, how they felt defeated
Mm.
with what they had. And in my research, and I love science, and I'm such a science buff, so that aspect of it was incredible. Um, and just recently, I've been taking these tablets. They're mushrooms, and they're called turkey tail and lion's mane mushrooms.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's incredible because my memory has gone insane. It's like it's brought back a whole chapters of life, and it's become like a computer. So it's interesting how using these kind of natural remedies, I feel like I've started to join the dots in my mind and in my brain. And it's kind of helped with my dyslexia as well. It's kind of helped create and join pathways, because I think in dyslexia sometimes also pathways are disconnected. It's all there, but it's not functioning with, I would say, one centralized system. I feel like it functions with two people arguing with each other in your mind, what you're supposed to do and what this wants to do. Is like two children.
Yes, yes, yes. The two poles getting not interacting in the way they should do. And did you pour? Obviously, the show's rooted in your own experience, but how much of other people's experience through your research and reading and interaction with other dyslexics did you pour into the show?
Well, because it was so centered around the story of the missing A, and
Mm.
there was a lot to do with me, but I did when I started to speak to people. It felt like, when you have that eureka moment and you say
Yeah.
something, they're like, oh yeah, me too. I
Yes.
also
Yes.
feel this, or,
Yep.
this is also really difficult for me, or this is, and sometimes it was an incredible surprise when some people came around to me and said, oh yeah, by the way, I'm dyslexic too. Like someone who worked in my office for a year and a half or 2 years, then at some
Mm.
point, and who was organizing things and writing all the emails and everything, and then eventually told us, oh yeah, by the way, I am very dyslexic. And I said, well, why do you say? And I said, I never noticed. She goes, that's because I've learned to hide it really well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there was that kind of that aspect of it. And I suppose, for me, like when I'm creating a piece, I listen to a lot of stories, and I find the common ground between those stories. And actually, there's a lot in common with a lot of dyslexic people, but at the same time, I maintain what I say when I say we're so unique and
Mm.
such
Yes.
individuals, that I didn't want to make this piece a big mishmash of 10 different stories. I just wanted to find, what have we got in common in
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say. And there were so many things that, everyone had in common. I mean, I'm sure I've mentioned a few things right now that people will identify with,
Yeah. Yeah.
the common things. So yeah, there was a lot of research, done in that time, and meeting a few people and speaking to them. But what I think is beautiful is being able to kind of celebrate that difference and similarity, both.
Yeah. Definitely. Do you do the musical score for the show as well?
Nikki Wells did the musical score,
Oh,
so she's a
okay.
long colleaborator of mine, and but I work really closely with music, so I'm really specific what I want.
Yeah.
I want it. And, as Kathak dancers, we use a lot of mathematics, and Basically, we create mathematical poetry, if you want to put it.
Yeah.
Dance is calculated, and it's very mathematical, very calculated, but it becomes poetic.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to kind of bring that world of poetry in, and lose the world of mathematics a bit, and to create a world where, underlying in all this kind of like very complex um, uh, musicality, there's a sense of simplicity that I wanted to kind of celebrate, because ultimately I wanted this piece to be accessible. I didn't want it to be a niche piece to a niche audience. I wanted it to be accessible, and therefore the music had to play a very big part in it. And it had to feel like it touches, for me, the soul first, and then it goes to the mind. So rather than
Okay.
my ears, I wanted it to go directly to the heart first.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking, how do you tie what would, in your mind, in your world, what would neurodiverse and dyslexic music sound like? But that's kind of interesting, getting the mathematical into it and then trying to get it more soulful.
I think there's one way of finding out, to go and see the show.
Yes. Yes.
Then you can enter my mind.
Yes, that is the most definite way of doing that. But while you're on the podcast, we can ask all the other questions around it. So that brings me nicely on to sort of what I like to do at the end of each episode of the podcast. Each guest that comes on the Dyslexia Life Hack Show gets 3 rapid fire questions from myself. They don't necessarily need short answers from yourself. So let's dive into question number 1. What prejudice have you had about dyslexia that's been proven wrong?
That dyslexics are dumb.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
So,
Yeah.
I think many entrepreneurs and myself have kind of proved it. So,
Yeah, definitely. Okay, and rapid fire question number 2. If an alien landed and you had to describe dyslexia to them, how would you do it?
I would dance a little, and they would be dumbfounded by looking at me, trying to communicate through movement. That's how that would describe dyslexia. Crazy.
I nearly thought you were going to say go see your show. Yes. And final question is rapid fire set. And seeing as this is the Dyslexia Life Hack Show, what is your favorite dyslexia life hack?
My favorite dyslexia life hack. I think it's obvious. My life hack is just to dance when I do everything. Dance when I talk, dance when I walk, think, dance when I argue, dance, 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 dance. And I've got through every tough problem in life through that. That's been my hack.
Yes, it's just in your veins, isn't it? Brilliant. Okay, that just leads me to thank you, first of all, for coming on the show. And is there anything else you'd like to add? And where can people find you?
They can just Google me, and I'm sure everything will be there. And they can also see when the shows are happening. And I hope to bump into some of the people who'll be listening to this podcast. So, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, again, thank you very much for taking the time to come on the show this evening. It's been fascinating hearing about your story.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
And I want to thank everybody else for taking time to listen. I will speak to you in the next episode. Goodbye for now.